If you knew you were enough, what would your life look like? What would love look like? This is the Enough Factor broadcast, where we're redefining what makes you enough in life and in love. Now here's your host, Suzette Virnon. Hello everybody, it's your life coach and relationship solutionist, Suzette Virnon. Thank you for joining me for this episode of my Enough Factor podcast. As a matter of fact, it is the next to the last episode for season 2. So I thank you so much for hanging with me and my esteemed guests through COVID, economic instability, and racial upheaval, all of which have shaken us awake to just how fragile our lives are, and at the same time, how precious life is. Regardless of whether you are a founding subscriber, that means you've been with me from the beginning, or if you're new to this podcast, I don't take your presence for granted because you took the time out of your day. And out of all the wonderful podcasts you could be listening to right now, you decided to listen to my wonderful podcast. So I really appreciate that. And also for those that are new, who might have come because somebody told you about me in this podcast, or the name of the podcast caught your attention. The mission of this podcast is to help you redefine what makes you enough in life and in love on your own terms. Though this podcast does not discriminate, the focus of it is high-achieving women whose views of themselves have been shaped by other folks' definitions way before they could figure it out for themselves. And it has become problematic. So if you're cool with the definition that other people have placed on you, that's fine. But there are those of us that say, hold on, I don't need anybody else writing my definition except for me. So this podcast and the services that I offer are designed to amplify your voice, your value, and your vision. I call them 3 critical factors of enoughness. So you can discover who you are, whose you are, and why you are. And with my products and services, I give you the tools for you to come to that conclusion on your own. Last week, I focused on the who, your voice. I talked about learned silence, especially in relationships. I talked about the challenges of getting married later in life and how the coping skills that helped me to cope or navigate my way through bad relationships were saboteurs of my good one. And it was really, really a profound awakening. So if you haven't listened yet and you tend to lose yourself in relationships, then I encourage you to check out last week's episode. You'll thank me for it. So now to today. Today, as promised, I want to focus on your value, which is the second critical factor of your enoughness. Like many of you, I sat with bated breath for weeks, waiting for the big reveal. You know, the big reveal of who Joe Biden was going to select to be his running mate for VP. And when I heard that Kamala had been selected, everything inside of me jumped up and down and cheered because I saw it as a win for women, and especially a win for Black women, right? It was exciting to see a woman selected to potentially hold the second highest office in our country. A Black woman who was proud of her culture, her heritage, who didn't dim her light, who didn't cow down to what people said women should be like, even more so how Black women should conduct themselves. Now, when I went on social media and was excited, woo woo, Kamala Harris, VP pick, historic moment. I saw posts that disparaged her readiness, pointing to her demeanor as one that might be judged by some people, whoever some people were, as the angry Black woman. I was like, okay, if you don't agree on policy, I'm cool with that. But to make it based on a stereotypical label that did not even originate in the Black community, it was a label placed on us women. It was somebody else's definition. I kept seeing the same words. They were the same words that were intentionally slipped into the lexicon of worth and worthiness when talking about Black women. Words like nasty were used. Words like dirty, undisciplined. Words like ungrateful, mean, disrespectful. Those words that even when women have ascended to places of authority, the Black woman is the victimizer. A couple of years ago, I worked with a business strategist who said to me, Suzette, your value is what you determine. Nobody else determines that. Worth, on the other hand, is what someone else is willing to pay. Nobody gets to decide your value. They only get to decide whether they are willing to pay it. But for people pleasers and people of color who are often high achieving women because we've been told we got to do it 10 times better, we got it twisted. We got the wrong memo. Instead of us setting our own value, we left it in the hands of other people to determine our value. And what people thought about our value was everything. It was everything. In fact, for way too long, we've tried to live up to someone else's standards. In our careers and even in our love lives, we have strove to convince others that we are not a threat. You don't have to be afraid of us. And on the other hand, that we are enough, that we are good enough, that we are woman enough, that we are wifey enough in our romantic relationships, that we are enough for you to give us your time, your support, your validation. Last week, on this very podcast platform, I talked about how silence erases your voice. It allows people to assert their definition into your equation. Well, today, another silencer, the silencer of your value, is people pleasing. Now, I want that to set in. Steve Furtick, the pastor and overseer of Elevation Church, a very popular church, and I think they're out of Charlotte. I listened to his sermon that aired last week on August 16th. And it spoke to me in a way that I did not expect it to. When he broke down the story of the woman with the issue of blood, a woman who had been labeled as unclean because she kept bleeding and kept hemorrhaging, and she could not make it stop. And it was really against the law at that time for her even to mix and mingle, for her to even come out and be among people. She risked everything to come out into the public. And she broke several laws when she reached out and touched the hem of his garment, what he was wearing. Yet the power of that touch stopped him dead in his tracks. And the way Steve broke it down, the reason she was afraid was because she was afraid she was going to get in trouble. Because what she did at that time was a violation. It was a violation. That was one thing. But then the other thing that was absolutely divine and interesting was Jesus was being bumped around by people who were all around him, because he was in a crowd that was evidently a thick crowd was all around him. So this woman had to make a lot of effort so she could kind of navigate her way through without looking like an obstruction, just so she could get close enough just to grab a thread, just to touch just a piece of what he was wearing. She had a thought, and that thought was, if I can just touch him, I believe in my heart that I will be made whole. And what I got out of that sermon, which the link to it I'll put in the show notes for those of you that are interested in hearing it. What it brought to the forefront for me, because that's what a divine awakened word is supposed to do. It's supposed to shift the light off of everybody else and shine the light. Have you have an encounter with yourself. And that's what happened. People pleasing at its core, at its fundamentals, is the belief that you aren't enough to be worthy of regard, consideration, and selection. You somehow feel unworthy. So instead of asking for what you want, you slip up from behind, like this woman with the issue of blood, and you sneak a touch. You sneak to get what it is you want. You behave the way you think the other person wants you to behave, so you can get the validation of your worth that you so deeply need. But like Steve said, when Jesus turned around and they had their encounter, he said to her, "You haven't done anything wrong. You're not a thief. And I know you came here thinking that you had to thief your way into getting your healing, that you had to steal it. You had to do a sneak attack to get it because of the definition people have put on you. But you're a daughter. You're a daughter. Thieves take in hopes no one will notice. But just like the woman got called out by Jesus when he said, 'Who touched me?' and she had to come and fess up and tell him all that had happened that led up to that moment, Love was calling me out in the same way. Love was looking at the final remnants of people pleasing and was looking at me and saying, you don't have to do that. You are a daughter. You aren't a thief. You aren't unclean. You aren't nasty. You are not what people said you are. You are not the definition placed on you. You are a daughter. She came thinking of herself as a thief. But the true healing went to wholeness when she was affirmed as a daughter. She was affirmed publicly by all that would have harangued her, would have criticized her, would have handcuffed her. He affirmed her in front of all of them. He didn't need their permission. He did not have to consult with any of them. And here's the thing, y'all. She didn't become a daughter because she was healed of her hemorrhage. She was already a daughter. She already was. She just didn't know it. The God that created her and said she was good recognized her despite what she had been labeled and what she believed. And when she admitted what she did and why she did it, which she thought he was going to harangue her for, it was merely an invitation to all the naysayers, to all the authorities. Daughter, your faith has made you whole. So now, let me bring it on home. Let's go back to where I left Kamala Harris. The question is not whether she is worthy, should have been selected, whether it will help Joe Biden win or not. The question is simple. Is this her moment? Is this her moment for recognition by the God who has deemed her a daughter? It remains to be seen if it's going to be her time to be the VP. But certainly, this historic moment was her time. And I want to say this to my high achieving sisters who struggle in their relationships, who feel like if they don't live up to a certain set of rules, if they don't abide by the definitions that are placed on them, that the man that they're interested in or the man that paid attention will lose interest. That's how people pleasing followed me into my romantic relationships. If I thought that a man was losing interest, then I automatically thought I had done something wrong, that I wasn't enough, that I had offended him. And it would put me in a quandary of trying to figure out how to get back in his good graces. And the more consumed I was with doing that, the more my value was in peril. Because remember, value is what you say. And I gave men the power to decide my value. And I did some really dishonoring things just to get that attention back. I became hypervigilant to listen to his every word and track his every mood so I could, like the woman with the issue of blood, sneak back in. All he would know is he just had an epiphany. And he would realize that I was worthy and worth it and that I was enough. And he'd begin to pay me attention again, like he did in the beginning. And that is why I have felt compelled to create ways of helping women who, just like me, have been living out somebody else's definition and it's running out. I help you rewrite your own definition by giving you tools, authentic tools from which to write it. Coming up just in the next few days is my webinar, How to Break the Cycle of Failed Relationships and Attract Healthy Love into Your Life, where I expose the elephants in the room that eat away at your self-value, your self-esteem, and your worthiness. I help you hit the reset button so that past relationships won't continue to woo you back into suffering and confusion just because you're feeling lonely or bored or your ex called you out of the blue. And I introduce you to my solution that helps you to know more about men, so you don't keep getting okie doke in relationships, doing like I did, trying to hold on to his every word and track his every mood in hopes that you can figure out how to make him love you. Right? The webinar, as I said, is going to be held in just a few days on August 27th at 12 noon Eastern time. It's going to be online and it's free. You can register by going to my website, SuzetteSolutions.com, and there you'll find it. You'll see the link for the free webinar. Another link you'll see is my Do You Speak Male solution. While it's going to be introduced during the webinar, there might be those of you that say, you know what, I don't need a webinar. I need to find out about this solution right now, because just the name of it resonates with me. You can find that on my website as well. All right. So before I end, I want to say this to you. It doesn't matter if you've been thought of as too much of this and not enough of that. If God has predetermined that this is your time, then it does not matter what people say or what they think. Take the power out of the hands of people to validate you. You are worthy. You are worth it. You are more than enough. You have just listened to the Enough Factor podcast with your host, Suzette Vernon. To get notified of new episodes or to dig deeper into today's topic, become a subscriber. And while you're at it, tell us how we're doing and what topics you're interested in. We appreciate your feedback and your reviews. Until next time, remember, you are worthy, you are worth it, you are enough.